Welcome to the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show. Here's your host, Alex Klausner and Bobby Carney.
Welcome to the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show, where Dynasty never sleeps. And we were not sleeping last night because we got treated to an overtime game on Thursday Night Football, where the Atlanta Falcons defeated Bobby's beloved Tampa Bay Buccaneers 36-30. So we are going to go ahead and dive into some of the Dynasty winners, losers, buys, sells, all of that. But first, before we do, want to go ahead and say this is an independent podcast. So everything you are about to hear is lovingly crafted by us. So please like, subscribe, support in any way that you can, including with being a hater in the comments. We love the haters. We'll take them on. You know, we're happy to have you here. We enjoy you being a part of the community and telling us how much you dislike listening to fantasy football analysis, even though you are listening to it. Anyway, we are going to go ahead and get on with some of that fantasy football analysis and dive right into game balls for last night. My game ball will go to, drum roll please, Kirk Cousins. Kirko Chains. 42 of 58, 509 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did have an interception that nearly killed his team at the end of the game. However, he supported Drake London. Drake London had a huge game for you in fantasy this week. Also, Darnell Mooney got a couple touchdowns. Also a bad drop at the end of the game. But regardless, was still a huge fantasy asset for you this week. And we got to give a little extra game ball to our man, Kyle Pitts. Hey, when you're wrong, you're wrong. And I was wrong about Kyle Pitts this week. He smashed. He got 7 of 8. He had also 88 yards. They didn't get him into the end zone. However, he did get in the mix this week. So that will be my game ball. I will now pass it to Bobby Carney to give his game ball of the week.
Yep. So mine, just because I'm a Buccaneer fan, I really want to give a shout out to Mike Evans again. I mean, the guy's still kicking it. He got you 2 touchdowns. Yards weren't that great, but I mean, having 2 touchdowns, 7 targets, you can't ask for more from a guy like Mike Evans. I still think he's a solid asset that maybe for, as we previously said in the podcast, a veteran asset that you could kind of look at maybe getting for the cheap for a playoff push. I still think that's in play, especially with these touchdowns. But if he keeps doing this, I think you're going to see, unless the team is completely out of it, you're not going to see anybody moving this guy if he keeps performing. So I think this is still a very early buy window with him. But it's definitely an encouraging performance. Following up a little bit with your game balls of Kirk Cousins. Guy went off. Incredible performance from him. Falcons fans have to be excited seeing some of that performance. I have no idea what defense the Buccaneers are playing at all. That was vanilla Tampa 2 as you can get. Everybody was wide open. The DBs were playing zone schemes versus the players, and it just looked like routes on air out there. It was insane. So great performance. I don't know how much you should expect performances like this moving forward. And it was also nice to see Kyle Pitts do well again. They have figured out again that he is a good athlete and a mismatch for people across the middle. But I will say a caveat: the Bucs linebackers are a little suspect with pass coverage. They have a very aging Levante David, who's still good, but he's more of a run support guy, and KJ Britt, who's 100% a run support guy. And then they're still beat up at safety with no Antoine Winfield. So Falcons definitely took advantage of that matchup with him. But it's at least good to see that he actually showed up.
Absolutely. One thing that you did just point out that I think is really important, I think for people who are going to look at the Falcons numbers and just go, the Falcons have arrived. All of these fantasy assets are just going to kill, right? It's like, yeah, Drake London got like 13 catches in this game. Darnell Mooney was targeted 16 times. And a large part of that was because Kirk Cousins nearly threw 60 passes in this game, right? How many times are you going to be asking Kirk Cousins to throw 60 passes a game? And that's going to be
They never led till overtime. They never led till that touchdown to win in overtime. They were behind the whole game.
That is kind of my point, right? I am not entirely so sure that you are going to be able to expect these kinds of performances from all of these guys weekly. Like, there aren't going to be many games where Drake London's getting 23 fantasy points for you, Darnell's getting like 21, and then Kyle Pitts is getting 15 on top of that, right? Like, there are just not many days that you are going to see like that. Now, I think that also is going to lead me to bring up how rare of a day this was, okay? Kirk Cousins last night became one of 2 quarterbacks to ever throw 500 yards in 4 touchdowns. Say it with me, Kirk Cousins, 500 yards and 4 touchdowns in prime time. Prime time Kirko. He did it. And you know who was the other quarterback on that list of one of 2 guys in the world? Thomas Edward Brady. All right? So you can just go ahead and classify last night as a stunning achievement on offense. Not the norm, okay? And if you are going to be banking on that kind of production from all of those guys weekly, I have swampland in Florida that I would like to sell you, okay? Because that is not going to happen every week. Now, you can expect they probably are going to lean on Kirk a little more and his arm. I do think you will see an uptick in pass attempts. You will see more games that are closer to that, but that game script isn't always going to be like that. And that is going to get us into the guy who is victimized by that game script. And that is our bell of shame. 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 Ding! Bobby, you go ahead and introduce our man. You took some flack for saying we should sell this guy, so I want you to talk on this.
Yeah, this is just another example of Bijan Robinson is not living up to the rookie hype after his rookie season. 12 rushes, 61 yards, long of 28. So half of that is on 1 run. So you factor that 11 rushes for 32 yards. Like, that's not what you're expecting from a Bijan Robinson that you paid 101 for, multiple firsts to buy him after that rookie year. This is another game. We're now in week 5 and we're still doing this. He's still getting carries taken away from him from Tyler Algier. Not just carries, drives. They're giving Tyler Algier drives over him. So he's still getting you a couple catches, 16 yards. He ended the day with 10 points, but at the end of the day, you get 10 points from a guy like Bucky Irving, who you spent a third on. You're not wanting 10 points from your guy you spent 101 on. And right. If this keeps going up...
Bobby's talking about a third-round rookie pick, not a third-round startup pick. We're talking about a third-round rookie pick.
Third-round
is
rookie
doing
pick.
The same thing as the guy you're talking 101 in your overall startup draft, right?
Yeah, so that is definitely... This is another performance of... We don't know what's going on with Bijan Robinson. Now, the one thing that I will say is, while the Bucs' pass defense was awful, the Bucs' rush defense is still a top 5 defense. They still showed that they're a top 5 rush defense. Playing him, so we made a social post before that game of all the numbers are telling you to not play Bijan Robinson this game. He's had a slow month to start. He's playing a top 5 rush defense. Do not play him, but people are going to sit there and say he's Bijan Robinson. They're going to play him anyway, and you paid the price playing him. So.
I do think there's 10 points is going to be not so bad if you played him in a flex, But if you're counting on him to be your RB1, then you definitely want more out of that. If you're paying the price that you pay to get Bijan Robinson, you want more out of that. And I'm just saying, as a guy who I like to take advantage of market discrepancies when I'm trading, right? Like if there's a guy who's constantly underperforming, but other people see as somebody who is going to be a killer, then I want to get that guy off my roster. I want to take that discrepancy, cash in on that, and take that value and turn it in to guys that are going to produce commensurate to the level that you're hoping for out of a guy like Bijan. I did this with T. Higgins last year, for example. I had T. Higgins on a roster that was really struggling, and T. Higgins was a huge part of that struggle. But the name value that people have to a guy like T. Higgins, people are willing to say, okay, well, I'll give you a first rounder for T. Higgins because he's T. Higgins, right? They're not thinking about, well, this is what T. Higgins is actually doing. And in fact, I think it was like T. Higgins was the highest percentage of starts on winless teams at a certain point in like last fantasy season. And it was because he was just consistently underperforming and blah, blah, blah. That is how you take advantage of this thing that Bijan Robinson is doing, because people are still going to go, he's Bijan Robinson. I will give you the ridiculous stuff for him that is stuff that should not be paid for a guy who's getting you like 10 points a game. Right? So that's one of the things. That's why there's a case to sell Bijan Robinson. Now, if you are sitting there going like, he's a hold, I mean, his talent is ridiculous, I don't blame you. Like, nobody's going to blame you for that. But if you want, I'm just saying, if you want to go ahead and kind of start thinking about whether or not you want to move off that asset, there is a legitimate case to do that. And I think that there's an honest conversation that you have to have with yourself as the Bijan Robinson owner about whether or not you want to sit on that or not. Now, Bobby, I want to go ahead and get into another bell of shame performer that you wanted to highlight today. So go ahead. Give us some shame. Shame. Ding.
Yeah, so my bell of shame is actually Bucky Irving. He's another guy that, like, we're sitting here, I would say, pooping on Bijan Robinson's performance. Bucky's was worse. He had 20 less rushes. He had 20 less rush yards on 3 less carries. You know, his long was only 16. My major reason that he's a bell of shame, because at the end of the day, when you look at the stat sheet and look at, a lot of people did well in this game. A lot of people did well. His fumble cost the Bucs the game. Like, it gave the Falcons an extra possession. It took at least a field goal off the board. They were moving the ball. The Bucs could have scored a touchdown and ended the game. So, as you know, he still went back in the game, and they still gave him the ball in the next drive. But just something that you need to look for as you're trying to get Bucky Irving more carries and more shares in this offense. Stuff like that is going to keep him off the field. If he keeps doing that, Rachaad White's going to get those carries back. Rachaad White's going to see the field. He's going to go back to 70% of seeing the field versus 50%.
I mean, I do want to point this out, though, because I think it's an important thing to note, is that when Bucky Irving had that costly fumble, right? The coaches did not just say, "You're out of there, Rook." You know, they actually put him back out on the field. They gave him the very next touch. They gave the ball right back to him. So my thing is, I'm not so sure that I buy the fumble is going to hurt Bucky's long-term value with the team. And so, you know, I think this is actually a great segue, because we were next going to talk about buys and sells. And Bucky is my buy. That's the guy that from this
and
game,
Rachaad is my buy. So that's why I really want to have this conversation.
Yeah, I mean,
we're really going to sit there and figure out, like, this, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting backfields to discuss right now in Dynasty football, because unlike a situation where it's like a Bijan, Tyler Algier, like, no one really wants to buy Tyler Algier. everybody is on Bijan Robinson. I think this is very similar to like Najee and Jalen Warren from the Steelers last year. I think this is a very similar backfield to that right now. If you've got like two guys that are just doing the exact same thing.
Yes and no, because like the Jalen Warren thing last year was kind of interesting because it was almost like there was this perception that Jalen Warren was just going to come in and take all of these carries, and then he just never did, right? And then now we've seen him like almost like completely phased out in favor of just giving Najee the rock like 20 times. And I think like that was just more like people were wishing Jalen Warren would come in and take all of these carries because they think he's the better player. But here we actually really see a legitimate even split in the carries between these guys. Like their usage, they're legitimately, usage and production really rival each other, and they act sort of as like the same running back, like duplicated in a sense. However, one reason I'm buying Bucky is just because I think he's the better player. I mean, this is the stat I come back to. This past game, okay, this was the first game where Bucky Irving was outrushed by Rachaad White. You know what I mean? The dude's backup has been outrushing him for the majority of the season. And so Bucky Irving is definitely the better runner. Now, I get it. There's an argument for Rachaad White as the pass catcher. I'm going to let you make that argument. Like, people should definitely hear the Rachaad White buy case as well. But to me, the reason why I would say Bucky's my buy, whereas you're saying sell because, or you're saying like, maybe I would rather have Rachaad White. I'd rather have Bucky than Rachaad because I really feel like the coaches seem to really see something in him to give him all of these touches early. They seem to be willing to trust him with the ball again, even after he made a mistake. It's like they see a future with him. That's why they would give him the ball. I think in pre-production, we were talking about this, right? Because you were saying it was like, we got to give this guy the ball back because of confidence. We don't want him to lose confidence in himself. Well, why don't you want to lose him to lose confidence in himself? Because you've got a long-term plan for him, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't care. You just say, all right, well, forget it. Back to the practice squad with you, buddy. So I think Bucky Irving is going to stay involved. I think the thing is you want to buy him now. You want to let this timeshare play out a little bit, and then you want to wait for Rachaad White to leave the room. And then it's going to be the Bucky Irving show. So I'm definitely willing to go ahead and pay, even as his value has continued to increase in the market, and Bobby's going to talk about that when I pass it to him to talk Rachaad. This is why I'm still thinking Bucky's good, because his value now was like probably like a second and just like a little bit on top of that. If you're telling me that you can have a high quality like flex option now, because he can be that, he has the upside to be that, and I can have potentially the Buccaneers RB1 later, I'll pay a second a little on top. So now I'm going to pass it over to Bobby, who's going to tell us why I'm wrong. We want Rachaad White. All right, let's go.
No, I think both cases are good. I think both backs are something that are very valuable right now. Where my buy case is, I think Rachaad White is undervalued right now. I think it's a situation of everybody sees the Bucky train coming. Everybody sees this, hey, this is a rookie running back. Rashaad's near the end of his deal. Like, I think he's got 1 year left after this. So there's a lot of hopium coming of, hey, he could snake the RB1 job this year, but definitely down the road he's going to have the RB1 job if they do not re-sign Rachaad White. But where my case is going like, hey, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to see that and be selling Rachaad White and desperate to sell Rachaad White and get what they can out of him. So I can definitely see, like, I don't think you will ever have to pay more than a second on Rachaad White right now. I mean, you might be able to get him for like another player. You might be able to do a player-player swap. Maybe you can actually get multiple thirds out of him or something like that. Like, I really think he's incredibly undervalued for a guy that's doing the same production as Bucky Irving. Where Bucky, you might have a situation of, hey, rookie running back, slowly snaking RB1. You might have to start paying first for him. That's where I'm sitting there going, as we were discussing a little bit with Bijan Robinson, of player name and value and draft capital, but your price is going to be a lot heftier on the Bucky side versus the Rachaad White side. So that's where I'm sitting there leaning. I hear everything you're saying about Bucky Irving. I definitely see that this a torch is being passed, but I can also sit there and seeing, hey, let Rachaad White walk, and then what happens if he goes into a Kansas City system? That's where you have to also sit there and where does he go after that? Where if he goes to Dallas? Like, he would be great. All that value goes back up if he goes to Dallas. So that's where you have to sit there and you could have a very good buy window right now with Rachaad White.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. You do have to somewhat think about how players like Rachaad can maintain value year over year when they kind of hit that free agency window and there's a chance for them to kind of get into a situation that could be favorable, right? We saw this happen with Zach Moss over this offseason, right? Zach Moss, coming off of that season that he had in Indy, where he was kind of subbing in for JT and killing it, basically earned himself a starting job somewhere else in Cincinnati this year. Maybe that does happen for Rachaad. Okay, you were talking a little name value. Now we want to talk about sells. And the sells have got some name value to them. My sell, and I am going to admit that this is such a cop-out to say this. And the reason I'm copping out a little bit here is because there really aren't guys that I really am trying to move off of playing in this game besides Bijan, who we already talked about. So I want to take an opportunity to just shout out a little strategy here, which is, look, if you are somebody who is new to the Dynasty space, new to our show, one thing you always want to be doing is you want to try to maybe age down a little bit, or you want to try to sell your veterans when their value in performance is at its highest, right? And so thus my sell is Mike Evans at wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers due to age. The guy he's in his 30s at this point, okay? Time comes for us all at some point, and Mike Evans, despite looking like an ageless wonder, he's always going to have 1,000 yards. He's always going to have 13 touchdowns or something like that. But the day will come when the age cliff will hit him. And you just don't want to be holding the bag unless you're contending. So my point basically is that if you are somebody that's new to Dynasty and you're getting your butt kicked right now, and Mike Evans is on your team, get him off of that team. Get him to somebody where it's like, hey man, you look like you probably are going to go to the championship. How about Mike Evans to help your run? There is somebody that is going to give you something of value to try to get that kind of production on their team when they see themselves as being in that championship window. Or maybe there's a middling team that's dealing with some injuries right now. The guy who's got Puka Nacua out and is sitting there going, man, I need some receiver help. Mike Evans, if you are shopping him, that's a good guy to go call. So try to find that guy that can use that receiver. Go get, if you've got Mike Evans and you're 0-5 or after this weekend, then you want to think about moving him. And now I'm going to pass it to Bobby, who is going to give us his sell of the week from this game.
Yes, before I start my sell, I just want to follow up on your Mike Evans sell. Your sales pitch to get rid of Mike Evans is Now, some of these numbers will update once everybody has played week 5, but right now he's top 15 in catches. He is top 15 in yards, and he is number 1 in the NFL in touchdowns at 31. That's why you sell him. That is exactly why you sell him.
But the reason you sell him is the part that Bobby said when he said at 31, right? If Mike Evans was doing this at 25, no freaking way are you letting this guy go off your team.
Yep.
Right?
Well, and then another thing I would also follow up on is, so he recently re-signed with the Bucks. Like, he was a free agent last off season. He re-signed with the Bucks. His deal is a 2-year deal. So he has this year and he has next year in Tampa. You have to know, you're an idiot if you think that he plays after 2025. He's playing this year to tie Jerry Rice's record, and he's playing next year to break Jerry Rice's record, and then he's done. Period.
Well, and that's the thing. If you are the contender, you want to try to buy those 2 years, right? If you are looking to go for that title, because Mike Evans is going to help key that with those kinds of numbers. You know what I mean? So it's a very easy sell to a contender if you are a not contender holding Mike Evans. All right, Bobby, your sell. Give it to us, man.
Yes, I love the man, but my sell in this game has to be Kyle Pitts. You know, this team for about a year and a half has no idea how to use Kyle Pitts. This game showed a preview that maybe they found a way how to use Kyle Pitts. As the Buccaneers fan, I want to tell you, their linebackers can't cover anybody. With Levante David being old and KJ Britt literally being just a run-stuffing linebacker. He cannot cover. The Buccaneers are also without Antoine Winfield Jr. That was most likely who would be on Kyle Pitts if he was playing. He wasn't there. They had a mismatch there, and that is why they fed him this ball. So I love the man. He is a great player, but I would not be surprised if next week he's back to 2 catches for 12 yards, and we're here back in Kyle Pitts land of why is he doing nothing? So possibly use this window of, hey, you now have 3 weeks now where he's most likely going to end as a top 5 tight end. That's a majority of that. I mean, that's what, 60% of the season so far. So you have enough production where you can sit there and go, hey, he's tight end 5 in 60% of your games this season. Hey, let's not look at those 2 games where he did nothing. But you might have your sell window of like, hey, he's producing this. It's still tight end wasteland out there. You could try to sell. I don't know the rest of the Falcons' schedule. Maybe there's some weak opponents coming up. Maybe some DVOA that's going to favor him. You can definitely use this as a sell window right now for Kyle Pitts.
You can, but my question would be this, right? It's like some of the stuff I heard you say as far as like what you would try to tell an owner, you know? Like, this is kind of the case for Pitts. It almost sounds like maybe he's a buy.
No.
Because you're getting a top 5 tight end, 3 out of 5 weeks, right? But you'd have to just deal with the floor.
That's a good salesperson. That's a good salesperson of, how are you not buying this? I'm offering you a great opportunity of getting out of this. Why are you not? You're an idiot for not doing this deal.
Right.
Like, so that is what a good salesperson should do, is that it should sound like a buy, which is why you would buy.
I would buy, I guess I would say this. If I am a dynasty player that like really doesn't care about risk, like out of my tight end position, if he gets me 0, fine. I'm cool with that. If you are that kind of player where you kind of view the tight end maybe as like a boom or bust slot for you, Kyle Pitts is a great guy to fill that, because he is going to have this kind of upside due to his athletic profile, the way that when he gets into space and when he gets open, he can really like do damage with that. I do think that there is like Kyle Pitts is a great guy to have in best ball. You know what I mean? But if you're playing weekly fantasy and you really, really value consistency, not a player you want to be in on. So that's just something that you have to think about when it comes to how you value Kyle Pitts, like your format and your risk tolerance, I think really should guide your decision making as you kind of work through that decision on how you manage having Kyle Pitts buying or selling. So that is going to get us to the end of this episode. But before we get to this end of this episode, we have one last big bell of shame to hand out. And I will let Bobby hand out this bell of shame. Ding to
you
NFL
really want me to
referees.
sound like that butthurt fan right now. You really want me to sound like that butthurt fan.
I just thought, it's worth mentioning some of the things that you had you noticed about the way the end of the game went down, and I thought you should have a little forum to air some grievances.
I'll try to keep it short and sweet. I am done with NFL officiating. I'm done with it. I know that they've put in some rules and stuff to try to make things a little bit more efficient and a little bit more accurate and stuff. It's not working. If you have real-time reviewing, how do you miss a face mask that would have ended the game? Bucky Irving was face masked on that drive to milk out the clock. They didn't call it. It would have ended the game. Then you have the Falcons driving, and they down the ball at the player is down at 7 seconds, and then they get to I don't know how many times I've seen an umpire go, hold up, I have to set the ball. No, they just let Falcons do whatever they want and spike the ball. Receivers weren't set. They definitely were not lined up properly. But no, sure, let's just give them a one. And then they spiked it at 1 second. I have no issue with that. But they definitely were not lined up in an illegal formation. That should have been either A, illegal formation, or false start because they weren't set, and the game should have been ended. There's 3 calls they should have had to where the Falcons do not kick a field goal. But no, they still get to kick a field goal and tie the game and then go on to win it. So I do not know what we need to be doing with officiating. I have ideas of what they should be doing to make things a little bit better, but we are a fantasy football podcast. We are not an NFL officiating podcast.
We are not, but I will say there is one thing that is just so easy for the NFL to do, which is make NFL refs full-time employees, people.
Yes,
this is not that
money.
hard. Like, just pay the refs as full-time employees, guys. All right. That will do it for the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show. I've been Alex Klausner. This is Bobby Carney, not a butthurt Buccaneers fan.
Yep.
All right.
Just
we
a
just
little.
want to say, just a little, just a tad.
Just a little.
We just want to say thank you so much for listening and spending any part of your day with us. Please like, subscribe, comment, follow us on social media at Dynasty Fantasy Football Show or Dynasty FF Show on all your social media. And let's see. Yeah, just go ahead and send us any questions you may want to have answered on the pod. We will consider doing like a mailbag episode when we get enough questions for that. So we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, peace out.